So in this video, we'll be looking at equations of a straight line with focus of y equals mx plus c and find the gradient and the equation of a line from a graph. Now the equation of a line is represented by y equals mx plus c, and where x and y are going to be your coordinates and m is going to be your gradient, which is a mathematical word for the steepness of the line, that being an n, and the c is the y-intercept, which is basically where the line crosses the y-axis. So in order for you to write down the equation of a straight line, you'll need these two bits of information for you to actually work out what the equation is going to be. So you need to find what the gradient is and what the y-intercept is going to be. Now, in terms of finding the y-intercept, this should be relatively quite straightforward. So what you need to do is look at the line, and it's this number which is what you're wanting to spot. So for example, if I just get rid of that yellow and not the whole graph, so let's make that return. And so for example here, so let's say just for argument's sake that this number here is 7, then basically here c would equal positive 7. If it was 17, then c would equal 17, and so forth. Now when we move on to a graph with negative gradients, let's say we're looking at this point here, so this is going to be my c value, and let's say that was at -5, then that would mean that c equals -5. If that point there was at, let's say, -28, then c would equal -28. So the c value is basically where the diagonal line crosses the y-axis. And again, the y-axis is always the vertical axis. Now, in terms of finding the gradient, this one's a little bit more tricky and probably best to work out by using the following steps. Now, if these steps make absolutely no sense to you at all, and at face value, they probably won't, but do not worry, because when I go through some examples, I'll recall these steps, and it should hopefully then make sense when we go through an actual example. So in terms of finding the gradient, which is our m value, what you need to do is pick two coordinates that lie on the line. Now you definitely want to pick some whole number coordinates, not in between. You don't want to be messing around with decimal coordinates. So try and pick two distinctive coordinates that lie on the line. Now it doesn't matter which coordinates they are, as long as they're two different coordinates, then that's going to be absolutely fine. Now the next thing you then need to do is, using these 2 points, draw a right angle triangle using the line as a diagonal. So what you should end up with is something that looks like these two diagrams. So if you've got a positive gradient, then here is my, let's say if this is my two coordinates, then all I'm going to do is join the points up to make a right angle triangle. And likewise for this second one here, pick two coordinates and then I draw a right angle triangle to get from there. Now the next thing we then need to do is, using the numbers on the scale, find the height and the base of the two triangles. So for example, if I try not to delete everything, and let's see if I can be really careful. No, and that's not a problem. We can try that again. So in terms of using the scale, so let's say I've got a straight line. Let's actually be accurate in terms of this. So here is my line. I've picked, oh, let's change color. So I'm going to pick two coordinates. So I'm going to pick this coordinate here and this coordinate here. I'm going to join them up to make a right angle triangle. And then what I need to do is, using the scale, I need to work out the height and the base of that triangle. So there's going to be that base, and this is going to be our height. Now then, using those two numbers, what I then need to do is work out the gradient, which is the height divided by the base. And then once I've got that value, I then need to decide, is my gradient going to be positive or negative? Now again, if your line is going upwards, it's going to have a positive gradient. If your line is going down, it's going to have a negative gradient. And then all you then need to do is write m equals plus or minus, and then whatever your answer in step 4 was going to be. So let's have a look at some general examples. So once you have both the gradient and the y-intercept, we need to substitute these values into y equals mx plus c, and we can write down our equation. So let's have a look at what we should end up with. So here we've got our gradient, and next to it we've got our y-intercept. So in terms of working with this one, here we've got m equals 4 and c equals 5. So therefore the equation of that line is going to be y equals 4x plus 5. Now again, if you've got no sign in front of the numbers, you just assume it's positive, so you can write it as a plus. Going on for the second one, so here my m is equal to 6 and my c is equal to -2. So the equation of that line is going to be y equals mx, which is 6x, take away 2. And then for the third one, m equals -7, and in this case c is going to equal the y ordinate, so it's going to be y equals -7x plus 3. And then finally, for our last one, we've got m equals -3, c is going to equal -4. So here we've got y equals -3x, take away 4. And there is the equation of each of those lines based on those bits of information. So let's have a look at the main principle of this video and going through those six steps of working out what the equation of the line is going to be. So the first thing you want to do is pick two nice coordinates. So what I mean by nice coordinate, so this point here is a nice coordinate because that's 2, 4. What isn't a nice coordinate is me picking this point here, where I'm going to have to kind of go into decimals, and I don't really want that. So what I want to do is pick two nice coordinates. Doesn't matter what size the coordinates are. So for example, I'm going to go for these two. I could easily have gone for this one, that one, that one, that one, any of those two coordinates that I'm drawing now, but I only need two. So let's just get rid of a fair few. Let's just get rid of them all and pick two fresh ones. So I'm going to pick this one here and I'm going to pick this one here. Now the next thing I then need to do is turn this into a right angle triangle. So what I'm going to do, now I'll probably recommend you use a ruler for this, but I'm going to draw a right where the line is a diagonal line. The next thing I then need to do is work out the height. Now the height of this triangle goes from 2 to 4, so therefore the height is going to equal 4 take away 2, which is 2. And then the base, which is going to be this length here, and that's 2 take away 0, so then the base is going to equal 2. Now from this I can then work out what the gradient is going to be. So the gradient, or m I can call it, is going to be the height of that triangle, which is 2, divided by the base, which is 2, which is equal to 1. So what I've got is I've got m equals 1. Now the next thing I probably should have done this first, so I'll just get rid of all the markings, is I now need to know where does this line cross the y-axis. Well, it crosses it at 2, so c equals +2. Now, one thing I forgot to mention was the gradient. So here our line is going upwards, so therefore it's going to have positive gradient, so m is going to equal +1. So from this, what I can then do is work out the equation of a line. So therefore the equation of this particular line is going to be y equals m, which is 1, x, and it's always x, plus 2, and there is my final answer. Or I could write that as y equals single x plus 2, and there is my final answer. Now it doesn't really matter which one you go for, but I would say the latter, this one here, is probably better, because when you've got 1x, you don't really use the number 1, you just say x. So moving on to our next example. So again, what I'm going to do is, now this one I'm actually going to go for c first. So c is -1 in this particular example, so that's absolutely fine. So let me just get rid of that. So the next thing I need to do is pick two nice coordinates. So I'm going to go for these two coordinates here. Now the dangerous thing you want to do is count the squares. Now in some cases counting the squares will be absolutely fine, but you just need to be wary, particularly with much higher level questions, that you're looking at the scale to look at the numbers, not the actual boxes. So try to avoid counting the boxes where you can, but look at the numbers of the height and the base of the triangles. So looking at this, I can see that it's gone from 5 to -1, so that means that this length here is going to be 6. and these two coordinates are going from 0 to 3, so that's going to be 3. So m equals 6 divided by 3, which is 2. Now I've got positive gradient, so m is going to equal positive 2 because the line is going upwards. So from these two bits of information, I can then work out what the equation of the line is going to be. So it's going to be y equals mx, which is 2x, and it's going to be minus 1 because that's my c value. And there is the equation of that line. So now let's look at another equation. So this one here, so I can see straight away that my c is equal to minus 5. So let's just get that done straight away. Now the next thing I then need to do is pick two nice coordinates. So I'm going to go for this coordinate here and this coordinate here. And again, I'm going to draw my triangle. Now from this, as the line is going downwards, I'm going to have negative gradient. So looking at the base and the height of that triangle, I've got minus 3 to 0, so that's going to be 3. And I'm going from minus 2 to minus 5, so that's also going to be 3. So working out m, it's going to be 3 divided by 3, which is 1. And because the gradient is negative, m is going to equal minus 1. So from those two values, I've now got my c and my m value. The equation of the line is going to be m equals, and it's going to be minus 1x, take away 5. And there is my final answer. Now, obviously, you can then write this as y equals minus x minus 5, and that would still get you full marks because obviously when there is no number in front of the letter, we just assume that it's a 1, even if it's positive or negative. So moving on to the next one. And again, hopefully you'll find these relatively quite repetitive. So I'm going to pick two random coordinates. So this time I'm going to go for a large triangle. Now looking at this straight away, I can see that c is going to equal positive 4. So that's that one done. Now looking at the triangle, the height of that triangle, well, for starters, it's going to be a negative gradient. So then from this, I've got a height going from 4 to minus 4. So that's going to have height of 8, and I'm going from 0 to 4, so I've got 4. So here I've got 8 divided by 4, which is 2. So the gradient is going to be minus 2, because it's negative. So from these two values, I get an answer of y equals minus 2x plus 4, and there is my final answer. Now sometimes in maths we don't like starting things with a negative, so what sometimes you might do is flip the two equations or flip the two terms so that we always start with a positive. But again, they're both the exact same thing, so if that doesn't, the second part doesn't really make much sense, then just leave your answer as minus 2x plus 4. So now moving on to this one here. Now this one we do need to be a bit careful because although the y numbers are going up in 1s, the x values are going up in 2s. So again, I first of all need to find out what c is. So c is going to equal 1. I've got positive gradient. So then working out with m, so I'm going to pick my two coordinates. I'm going to go for this coordinate here and this coordinate here. Now counting the squares for the base, you might think, oh, it's 2 across, but actually it's going from 2 to minus 2. So therefore the base is going to be 4. Now looking at the height, I'm going from 3 to minus 1, so that's also going to be 4. So here my gradient is going to be 4 divided by 4. So m equals 1. Remembering that m is positive, so m equals positive 1. Then once I've got my m and c values, I can write out what the formula is going to be. So it's going to be y equals mx, so that's 1x, plus c, which is positive 1. And again, I can just write that as x plus 1. And either of those two answers are going to be fine. Moving on to the next one. So again, I go for c equals minus 6. I've got positive gradient. So I then need to draw my triangle. So I'm going to go for this coordinate here and this coordinate here. Now looking at the height, I'm going from 0 to minus 6. So I've got a height of 6. And I'm going from 0 to 2. So that's going to have a base of 2. So m equals 6 divided by 2, which is 3. So because m is positive, m is going to equal positive 3. So the equation of this line therefore is going to be y equals 3x minus 6. And then moving on to this question here, again I've got c equals, now the Y-intercept hasn't really got a number, but it is exactly between 0 and 2. So therefore c is going to equal 1. I've got positive gradient. And so all I now need to do is pick my two coordinates. So I'm going to go for this coordinate here and this coordinate here. And again, trying to avoid using half squares, just try and go for nice, neat coordinates. So looking at this, I can draw my triangle. So it's got a height of 0 to 2, so that's 2. And minus 2 to 2 is 4. So here the gradient is going to be m equals 2 divided by 4. So don't always think that it's always the big number that goes on top. It's always the height divided by the base. So here we've got 2 divided by 4, which is a half. So m is going to equal positive a half. So with these two values, I substitute it into y equals mx plus c. So I've got y equals a half x plus 1, and there is my final answer. Moving on to the next one. Again, I've got c equals minus 4. I've got positive gradient again. So picking the two coordinates, I'm going to go for this one here and this one here. So this time I'm going to go for a relatively small triangle. So looking at this, I've got a base going from 4 to 3, so that's got 1, and 2 to 4 is 2. So m equals 2 divided by 1, so m equals 2, and because m is positive, m's going to be positive 2. So then using those two values, I get y equals m, which is 2x minus 4. And there is my final answer. Now, if you were to write y equals 2x plus minus 4, because obviously it's y equals mx plus c, and c is negative, then that would be fine. But you need to recognize that when you've got plus and a minus, it turns to a minus. And so writing y equals 2x minus 4 is a much better way of you writing your final answer. Now, moving on to our last example, which I'm sure you'll be glad to hear. So looking at this particular one, I've got c equals minus 30, and so that's my y-intercept. And so looking at my 2 points, I've got negative gradient. So picking my two coordinates, now again, it's really awkward, so I'm going to go for this point here, and let's go for this point here. Again, it doesn't really matter, because when you do the division, when you work out the base divided, or the height divided by the base, it will simplify. So the bigger the triangle, the more simplifying you have to do. The smaller the triangle, the less simplifying you have to do. So looking at the base, I'm going from minus 60 to minus 20, so that's got a base of 40. And this triangle, going for the height, is going from minus 10 to 30, so that's got a height of 40. So if I then, let's say for argument's sake, I pick two other coordinates. So let's say I'm going to go for this, well, not that colour. Let's go for purple. So I'm going to go for this point here and this point here. I've got minus 60 to minus 40, which is 20, and 10 to 30, which is also 20. So regardless of what the size of the triangle is going to be for this particular line, the height is always going to equal the base. So here I've got m equals 20 divided by 20, because again it's the height divided by the base, which gives me m equals 1, but as is m is negative, m's going to equal minus 1. So therefore the equation of this line is going to be y equals minus 1x minus 30. Or you can write it as y equals minus x minus 30, and either of those answers are absolutely fine. Now we'll put some practice questions in the description below along with your answers for you to check your understanding of everything that's been covered in this video.